Alright guys, welcome to what I call the cold shop, where well, it's called the cold shop because it doesn't have heat. This is where I do most of my woodworking. This is where I would turn larger pieces of wood down and then carve them into guitar bodies, and most of my finishing and sanding would be done here. All the electrical stuff and all the painting and coating of the guitars is done in the other room. So here we are. I want to talk about this guitar body that we've got here and how they kind of get to it. So this is an African mahogany guitar body. It's made of 3 pieces of wood. It's really hard to see in the video, but there's a seam here and a seam here where they have a center piece of wood and 2 wings on it in order to make this one piece of wood. Bigger pieces of wood are generally expensive, and when you're going to paint something, it's really not that important to actually have one piece of wood. So usually in a guitar body like this, they would make it out of multiple pieces in order to save on some costs. Then if you look at the guitars that I make, actually, I'll take a billet like this and put multiple pieces together in a similar vein, but in order to actually show the look of the wood and to have multiple colors working together based on the way that I make it out of many pieces of wood. So once it gets to a billet like this, which this was something similar, it's put onto a CNC machine, which is this machine behind me here, where the machine will take a bit, usually it looks like a spiral drill bit, something like this, and it will come down into the wood and drill away everything that you don't want in the wood and carve all that away. It spits dust everywhere, which is kind of why this place it needs a vacuum once in a while, you know? That also, something to know about any type of router is that it can't get square corners. So when you look at these guitar bodies, you'll notice everything has a little bit of a rounded corner to it because it's cut by a spinning object that can't get into a square corner. Just something to think about. So from there, that larger chunk of wood, if I was making it, would be carved down into something like this, which would then be worked on from there and sanded. This is in the process of being sanded right now. And that's where we're at with our guitar body here, is that this is still kind of rough from the milling process. It's been sanded in the factory. I can tell at least a little bit. It's got some nicks and some scratches. You can kind of feel that it's still rough. So we need to sand it down. By the way, the password at this point, let's start with the first letter, is G. The first letter of the password is G. So while sanding, it's really important that you have the proper protection. If you look at my shirt, it's got sawdust on it. Now that's a good way to know whether or not you need to wear a mask. If you look at your shirt and you're covered in sawdust, that same dust in your shirt is in your lungs. So you want to really cover that up and you want to be able to protect yourself. Generally, I would wear a respirator like this. I wish I had this for the grocery store. These are hard to get right now, so I've been kind of not using it much. Just save it for when I really need it. A mask like this that most of you probably have. This was sewn by a friend of mine. Will work really fine for this for the most part. You'll still get some sawdust in. I have some masks that would just be a little easier for us to throw on quick. And so I can still talk. I can't talk to you guys with a big respirator on. R, by the way, G-R. Password, G-R. So I'm going to put on my mask. It's always important to have eye protection. It's always annoying to have eye protection and a mask because the eye protection always fogs. Just something to think about. And I'm going to use a powered sander. So I'm going to need to have headphones. You really don't want to be around power tools all the time without having headphones on. You will go deaf. Just like if you play too much loud guitar without headphones on, you will go deaf. Yes, I am going deaf. This could be done with a hand sander. This is what we would most likely use at school. It takes a lot longer. When you have power tools, you use power tools. So, I'm going to run the sander over the whole top, circular motion, I'm back. I can feel how much smoother this is already. I'm going to put it in the vise. Let me talk to you about something. Tables and vices are very important when you're working on stuff. It's actually an occupational hazard to work at a table that's not the right height for you, because what winds up happening is you're bending over all the time, and as you bend over all the time, you're breaking your back. So you really want to think about that if you're working in a space or setting up a space to work. Vices, it's going to be a lot easier, and I'm not going to do all of this because it will take time, more time than I've got in the video. And I'm going to sand now the top from here like that, and that's going to make it so I don't have to actually get around it or hold it off the side of the table. Having the proper things to hold stuff really makes a big difference in building stuff. But let's talk about G-R-I-T. G-R-I-T, which is grit, which is your password, by the way. Grit. Sandpaper grit is really important. Sandpaper comes in different grits, which is the different roughnesses. How much material it takes away in a given time, every time it goes around. The grit is by number. The grittiest of the sandpapers is, well, for what I'm using, is 60 grit, which is this sandpaper here. I don't know if you can see in the video, but it's pretty gritty. It really is more of a level sanding. It doesn't make anything smooth. It actually makes it really rough. I wouldn't put this on our guitar body now because it's just going to grind it up and make it all types of scratchy. It's already been processed better than this. So it goes from 60 grit to 80 grit. And 80 grit is a little bit smoother, but it still is going to leave a lot of scratches. 80 grit. Then you move down to 120 grit. 120 grit is starting to really make things smoother. You're starting to see less of the scratches. Some people stop here. I don't think that's a good idea. 120 grit will still leave like a swirly pattern because if you look at this thing, it's swirling. So 120 grit, and then you get down to 150 grit, which is really getting a lot smoother, and that's where you start to get rid of all those swirly lines. And then what we were using right here is 220 grit, and 220 grit almost feels like suede, like leather, and this will get this to the point where it almost shines a little bit, and where it can take the paint and we won't feel it, and where it won't have any rough spots, and we'll get rid of all those sanding lines that we might have had. So grit is our password, and grit is what you use in the sandpaper. Yeah, I'm going to keep on sanding this, and I will see you in the next part of the process. Thanks a lot, guys. Getting gritty over here.